Lucy Shaw stepped quietly through the grand entrance of the downtown public library, holding a stack of returned books close to her chest. The marble floors gleamed under the morning light streaming through stained glass windows, and the air smelled faintly of old paper and polished wood. She wore a plain cardigan and simple shoes, her hair pulled back in a neat bun, unassuming among the crisp suits and fashionable scarves of the patrons who chatted in small groups near the cafe. Her footsteps were soft as she moved to the rare books section, a sanctified space cordoned off by velvet ropes and guarded by polished wooden shelves housing centuries-old volumes. She began her routine of checking shelves and arranging books, careful to mend any out-of-place spines and smooth over any smudges on the glass cases. Lucy was used to blending into the background, invisible to most of the library's elite clientele who seemed more interested in socializing than books. Suddenly, a sharp voice cut through the quiet. "Who did this?" A tall man in a tailored blazer, his silver hair impeccably styled, stood holding a ruined book, a rare first edition with pages torn, ink smeared, and graffiti scrawled across the margins. All eyes turned towards Lucy. "She was the only one near the display this morning," the man said pointedly, eyes narrowing. His confidence was unmistakable, as if his word alone sealed her guilt. The murmurs began. A woman adjusted her pearl necklace and whispered, "How careless." Another man smirked, "Looks like the help has no respect for the place." Lucy's throat tightened. Before she could respond, the head librarian approached, stern and cold. "Lucy, you will apologize for this damage and wait here while we arrange for security." Humiliated and shocked, Lucy nodded silently, a knot of disbelief tightening in her chest. When she was finally escorted out, her footsteps echoed hollowly against the marble as she left the place she loved, innocent but broken. Lucy closed the front door of her small apartment behind her, the faint click echoing in the quiet space that felt emptier than ever. She leaned her forehead against the cool wood and let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding all day. The sting of humiliation from the library still burned beneath her skin, a dull ache settling deep within her chest. Her hands trembled slightly as she set her worn handbag down and sank into the sagging armchair by the window. The room was modest, nearly bare except for a threadbare rug and a tiny desk cluttered with pencils, papers, and a few well-thumbed books. The evening light filtered in through thin curtains, casting long shadows that seemed to swallow the corners of the room. Lucy stared blankly out into the darkening street below, the hum of distant traffic a fragile backdrop to her swirling thoughts. She wasn't hungry, but she pulled a half-eaten sandwich from the counter, chewing mechanically, wishing she could swallow her worries as easily. Sleep didn't come that night. She tossed and turned on the narrow bed, her mind replaying the scene at the library with cruel clarity, the sharp accusation, the cold glare of the head librarian, the whispered judgments from the patrons whose eyes had pierced her like daggers. She hated that she had felt such intense shame, as if she herself had destroyed the priceless book. But deep inside, she knew she had done nothing wrong. Her phone, silent and unresponsive, only deepened her isolation. No calls from friends, no messages to uplift her spirits, only the quiet void reminding her she stood alone in this fight. The job at the library was everything to her, a rare opportunity she had fought hard to win, a steady support for herself and her family despite the simple work. Now, it seemed, that lifeline was slipping away. As she lay awake, memories flooded her mind, dragging her back into a past that felt like a different lifetime. A younger Lucy sat cross-legged on her childhood bedroom floor, a sketchpad spread before her, pencils scattered like scattered dreams. She had been a brilliant art student then, celebrated by her teachers for her keen eye and attention to detail. The local gallery had accepted several of her works for a small exhibition, and whispers of a promising career had encouraged her. But life had other plans. Her father's sudden death from a heart attack left her mother fragile, the sole caretaker of 3 children who relied heavily on Lucy's quiet strength. She had set aside paintbrushes and palettes, trading them for hospital visits and night shifts at diner kitchens. The weight of responsibilities crushed the lightness in her steps, yet she never abandoned her family. In those difficult years, she had juggled every possible job, always searching for stability. The library position was a triumph, a step away from the exhaustion of past roles. It was honest work, safe work, and it allowed her a few stolen moments to sketch the world around her when the workload lightened. But now, with her integrity attacked and her position threatened, the future looked uncertain and fragile as never before. Her mind drifted to a recent Sunday afternoon when she had slipped into the library's quiet alcove after closing time. She had pulled out her favorite sketchbook and drawn delicate lines around the spines of ancient volumes, capturing their intricate covers and worn pages. Art had been her secret refuge, the small flame that no hardships could extinguish. Even when life tried to crush her spirit, those drawings reminded her of the person she was beneath the apron and muted clothes. The next morning, Lucy's hands moved almost of their own accord as she pulled the sketchbook from a hidden drawer in her desk. The familiar weight of the leather cover felt comforting beneath her fingers. She flipped through pages filled with sketches of the library, the ornate wooden railings, the sunlit reading nooks, even a few patrons caught in quiet moments. Her drawings were detailed and patient, born of hours watching and waiting for the perfect light. She paused on one page showing a rough sketch of the rare books section where the vandalism had occurred. A faint frown crept onto her face as she noticed a figure she had casually drawn, a young man with ruffled dark hair, crouched near a shelf, his face obscured but posture tense. She hadn't thought much of the sketch at the time, but now, it came back to her almost like a warning. Tiredness finally crept over her as the morning light filtered weakly through the curtains, but Lucy resisted the urge to rest fully. She knew she had to hold on to her resolve. The shame she'd felt was a weight she would carry, but she wasn't broken. The fight to clear her name had just begun. Days passed in a blur of quiet hours and restless thoughts, each moment fractured by the image of that torn book and the whispered accusations. Yet, amid the haze of doubt and pain, one detail glanced sharply into focus, an image from her memory that refused to fade, the silhouette of the young man, the one she'd sketched in the margins of her notebook. The thought had lodged itself firmly in her mind, unsettling and precise. On a slow Thursday morning, with cautious determination, Lucy returned to the library. She greeted the receptionist with a polite nod, careful not to show the turmoil she'd felt since the accusation. The building's grandeur seemed less welcoming this time, shadows hiding behind familiar corners. Slowly, stepping with purpose, she made her way to the security office, a small, cluttered room tucked away behind the reference desks. The security guard, a middle-aged man named Tom with a gentle manner but tired eyes, looked up when she knocked and stepped in. "Lucy, right? How can I help?" She swallowed her hesitation. "I was hoping, if you have time, maybe you could check the cameras from the morning when the vandalism happened?" Tom leaned back, curious but cautious. "The head librarian asked me not to reopen anything." She said. "It's settled." "I understand," Lucy said quietly. "But I remember seeing someone near the rare books, someone who wasn't anyone else accused. I think they might have caused the damage." He hesitated a moment, then nodded. "All right. Let's take a look." They squinted at the grainy footage flickering on the small monitor. The library was mostly empty, except for a few patrons moving through the aisles. Then, at the edge of the rare books room, a figure slipped in, a young man with disheveled dark hair and a worn jacket. He crouched beside a shelf, fingers trailing along the spines, eyes darting nervously. Moments later, he bent forward, and the camera briefly registered a book torn and dropped. Tom paused the video. "That's the first time I've seen him here." He frowned. Looks like trouble. Lucy felt her heart quicken. Then, as the footage continued, the young man glanced over his shoulder and dropped something on the floor before slipping away. Can you rewind? She asked, blinking through a sudden surge of hope. The frame pulled back, revealing a small, leather-bound sketchbook lying near the shelves, a detail missed before. Tom glanced at her, eyebrows raised. That could be evidence. Lucy's voice was steady now, the tremor replaced by resolve. Together, they retrieved the sketchbook from the shelf, hidden beneath a chair near the security station. The pages were filled with detailed, sometimes obsessive sketches, not just of library shelves and books but close studies of first editions and even notes about timings and movement. One set of sketches depicted the exact book damaged that morning, alongside crude plans to tear pages and deface its margins. Lucy's pulse raced as she read the pages. The handwriting, the style, everything pointed to the young man in the footage, the real culprit of the vandalism, not her. We have to show this to someone, she said, clutching the book. Tom sighed. I can tell the librarians, but don't expect much. They want to keep things quiet, keep their prestige intact. They might not want to admit they got it wrong. Her chest tightened at the thought. Just days ago, they dismissed her without a second glance, and now, the truth dangled beyond reach because it unsettled their perfectly ordered world. Still, Lucy understood. Her role was minor in their eyes. She was a simple assistant, part of the background. It was her word against that of a wealthy patron and a reputed student. She left the security office knowing the uphill climb that awaited her. Later that afternoon, Lucy called the head librarian, Miss Hamilton, her voice measured yet firm. Miss Hamilton, I've found evidence that might clear my name, a sketchbook and footage of the actual person who vandalized the book. Miss Hamilton's sigh crackled through the line. Lucy, this is complicated. The patrons are upset, reputations are at stake. We've decided to move on. I'm sorry, but there's nothing more to discuss. Lucy's fingers tightened on the phone. Please, I'm not asking for much, just reconsider. The truth matters. I didn't do this. Miss Hamilton was silent for a moment, then said, We'll talk tomorrow. But the conversation ended, trailing finally into a wall Lucy could not break. Determined not to be silenced, she spent the next days quietly returning to the library, speaking in low tones to staff who seemed reluctant but some offered small nods of sympathy. She studied social media and local art forums, where the young man, named Evan, had an account filled with drawings suspiciously similar to those in the sketchbook. One evening, she sat by her desk, comparing downloaded images to her own findings. Evan's posts showed an obsession with rare books and the art of defacement, a dangerous mix of admiration and destruction. The pieces clicked into place with sharper clarity. On one hand, there was the accusation made without proof, and on the other, a growing mountain of evidence pointing away from her. Though the library's administration wasn't ready to listen yet, Lucy felt the slow, rising strength that comes from knowing the truth and gathering the facts. Her quiet battle unfolded not in grand confrontations but in these small, determined steps. She wasn't a powerful figure, just a library assistant with a simple life. But that did not mean she was invisible. Not anymore. The day of the community event arrived like a ripple through the library's polished halls. The grand reading room was filled with patrons dressed in their Sunday best, shimmering scarves, tailored suits, and delicate jewelry. The air buzzed with the usual mix of polite conversation and soft clinking of teacups, the heavy scent of fresh flowers mingling with the faint perfume of tobacco from a distant lounge. Lucy stood near the entrance, clutching the tattered leather sketchbook to her chest. Her simple gray dress and well-worn shoes contrasted sharply with the elegance around her, but her eyes were steady. This was her moment not just to speak, but to be heard. The auditorium hummed with chatter, the voices of the wealthy, the educated, the influential, the very ones who had judged her days ago. She scanned the crowd and spotted the familiar figure of the silver-haired man who had publicly accused her. His smug expression softened slightly as he sipped from a crystal glass. Nearby, the head librarian, Miss Hamilton, sat stiffly, her hands folded tightly on her lap. And then, further back, she caught sight of Evan, the young man whose dark eyes flickered anxiously as he shifted in his seat. When the moderator invited Lucy to the podium, she stepped forward, the crowd's whispers cooling to a hush. She cleared her throat, lifting the sketchbook in one hand, the other steady and unshaking. "Good afternoon," she began, voice calm but strong. "A few days ago, the library was damaged. A priceless book was vandalized. I was accused of causing that damage, despite having no involvement. Today, I want to share with you something that was found, a sketchbook belonging to the actual person responsible." She paused and opened the sketchbook, revealing pages filled with frantic, detailed drawings of the rare books, their bindings, and even the very book defaced that morning. Murmurs stirred through the audience, eyebrows raising in surprise. She flipped to a page depicting a crude plan to tear and deface, alongside notes in jagged handwriting describing times and locations. This sketchbook was left behind by Evan, a frequent visitor and art student, who had access to the rare books before closing. The crowd's murmur swelled into whispers and quiet gasps. Eyes shifted towards the back row, where Evan's pale face betrayed his growing panic. His comfortable confidence was unraveling, replaced by a furtive desperation. Lucy continued, "Security footage, which I have reviewed with the help of the library's security guard, confirms these moments, showing Evan near the books at the time of the vandalism, and glimpses of the sketchbook being dropped." The atmosphere thickened as heads turned, stares sharp and insistent. Even the man who had accused Lucy looked away, grasping the rim of his glass as if it might steady his faltering certainty. Before Evan could rise to deny the charges, a ripple of voices began, soft at first, then louder. Patrons shifted uncomfortably, the tide was turning. Side conversations broke out among some, their tones skeptical of their earlier judgment. Miss Hamilton cleared her throat, standing, her face pale but controlled. "Ladies and gentlemen, we must take these findings seriously. The institution's integrity depends on the truth, and we apologize to Miss Shaw for the distress caused." The silver-haired man, his shoulders tight, murmured, "I suppose I was mistaken." Evan's eyes darted around the room, realizing the net was closing. He found no ally in the sea of formerly admiring faces. His voice, shaky and defiant, attempted to argue, but the weight of evidence was undeniable. The conference fell into uncomfortable silence as the truth settled in the room like a sharp chill. Lucy stepped down from the podium, feeling a cautious relief washing over her. This public unveiling was exactly what she needed, not only to clear her name but to restore some dignity to the simple work she loved. Outside, small groups approached her, some with hesitant apologies, others with whispered words of respect. The head librarian gently clasped her hand, a silent offering of support. The wealthy man avoided her gaze, perhaps reflecting on the swift reversal of fortune. As the event wound down, Lucy noticed other patrons nodding at her, their expressions softened by understanding. The crowd that had once whispered harsh judgments now saw her as someone honest, determined, and far from invisible. Though the road ahead was uncertain, Lucy felt empowered, not because she had shouted the loudest, but because she had quietly, patiently let the truth emerge. The simple assistant had reclaimed her voice, and in doing so, opened eyes that had long overlooked her. The days following the community event brought a ripple of change through the walls of the library, slow at first, then gaining momentum. The administration acted quickly, mindful now of public opinion and the trembling foundations beneath their carefully maintained reputations. Evan, once a celebrated art student and a familiar presence, found his privileges revoked. Notices went up announcing his expulsion from the local university's art program, and the library barred him from entering the premises. Word spread quietly but certainly through the circles of patrons and staff alike. The once hidden truth of the vandalism was now common knowledge, and Evan's deliberate actions no longer obscured by silence. The man who had accused Lucy remained, but his earlier certainty was replaced with a wary quietness that suggested he had learned the cost of hasty judgments. Meanwhile, the library's head librarian, Miss Hamilton, reached out to Lucy with a letter that carried the weight of sincerity and formality. It acknowledged the mistake made in swiftly accusing her and expressed regret for the embarrassment she endured. More than that, the letter offered Lucy reinstatement, not merely to her former role but with a promotion to assistant curator of special collections. It was an acknowledgement of her sharp eye, her integrity, and the dedication that had long gone unrecognized. Lucy sat at her small kitchen table, the letter in her hands as the morning sunlight streaked across the pages. Her heart fluttered between joy and an overwhelming sense of vindication. The promotion was more than a job title, it was a tangible recognition of her worth, a validation that the years spent juggling responsibilities and striving for a better life had not been in vain. Within a week, she returned to the library, this time greeted with nods of respect from staff and even patrons who once looked past her. The atmosphere felt different, warmer, more inclusive. Her tasks now included overseeing the rare collection that had once been the center of controversy. She arranged exhibitions, cataloged precious volumes, and even had the chance to curate a small display of historic artworks, an homage to the art she once dreamed of pursuing. At the next community gathering, Lucy's presence was met with genuine smiles and conversations that no longer skirted her. She saw the head librarian across the room. Miss Hamilton offered a nod of approval. The man who had accused her, now more reserved, briefly caught her eye and murmured a quiet, "I'm sorry." Lucy chose neither to accept nor refuse, recognizing that her strength was not measured by their words but by her own unwavering dignity. Her promotion brought new challenges, of course, but Lucy welcomed them with quiet determination. She spent hours poring over catalog records and restoration plans, losing herself in the delicate balance between past and present. In moments of solitude, she flipped through her beloved sketchbook, the pages worn yet vibrant, a testament to where she had been and what she had endured. One afternoon, as she closed the rare books room for the evening, a former patron approached her quietly. "Lucy," the woman said softly, "thank you for standing up for yourself. You remind me that sometimes the quietest voices can carry the strongest truths." Lucy smiled, a lightness settling in her chest she hadn't felt in years. The library had been more than a building or a job, it had become a place where she belonged, not as an invisible assistant, but as a respected guardian of its treasures. Walking out through the grand entrance one evening, after a long day filled with meetings and cataloging, she paused for a moment. The marble floors stretched ahead, the sunlight casting a golden glow on polished wood and brass plaques. Heads turned in acknowledgement rather than apprehension. She was no longer just a modest library assistant, they saw her as a woman who, despite setbacks and silence, had emerged with quiet grace and steadfast resilience. Her head lifted in gentle pride, Lucy moved forward with steady steps. The sketchbook tucked securely in her bag was more than art, it was a symbol of her journey, a simple woman once judged and dismissed, now recognized and respected. The world may have underestimated her, but Lucy had found her voice, and it spoke loud enough at last.